I'd like to introduce our speaker, Joe Simpson Jr. Joe is joining us from Castaic in the Santa Clarita Valley in California, and he is the founder of not one, but two WordPress meetups, and he is the lead organizer for WordCamp Santa Clarita. Today, he'll be talking to us about plugins, particularly how to find the right plugins. Joe, take it away.
Luck be a plugin tonight. Luck be a plugin tonight. Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. Joe Simpson here. Welcome to WordCamp Denver. Today, I'm going to take you on a trip. We're going to Las Vegas, baby. How many of you remember your first trip to Las Vegas? You're coming in on a flight. The bright lights are shooting up in the sky, so colorful, so incredible. Sin City, yeah. But you're wondering, what does Las Vegas have to do with WordPress? You got your luggage, you're going through the airport, and you see me over in the corner. Today, I'm going to be the person who's going to take you on your trip through Las Vegas. Hello and welcome to WordPress. Today's topic is going to be about plugins. And the reason why I connected to Las Vegas is that your first trip to Las Vegas can be overwhelming. There's lights everywhere. There's shows, there's dinners, there's friends, there's gambling. And you find that you can be overwhelmed. The world of plugins in the WordPress community can be the same. But let me tell you a little bit about myself first. My name is Joe Simpson, as we've seen. I'm a SiteGround ambassador. I started using WordPress in 2010. I'm currently on the programming team for WordCamp US. And back when I got back into WordPress, we didn't have any WordPress community in the Santa Clarita Valley. So I said, hey, I'm sick and tired of driving home at 10:20 p.m., spilling coffee on my lap. Let's start a meetup. So at my very first meetup, the very last slide, and the folks in the audience were looking at me like crazy. They're like, who is this guy? My last slide said, we're gonna host a WordCamp in Santa Clarita. Less than 2 years later, we accomplished WordCamp Santa Clarita. I also run a couple of meetups, as mentioned earlier, but I'm part of the digital strategy team at Metro Los Angeles, one of the largest transportation companies in the country, and I manage our WordPress blog network. In 2010, our lead developer and our CSS goddess both left our company at the same time. And I inherited a headway theme. For those of you that go back in time, you know what I'm talking about. The headway theme framework without a child theme. And it was like, here you go, Joe, figure it out. Fortunately, we had a budget at Metro. We're a government agency, and we know as a government entity, we don't have funds on a consistent basis. We were able to migrate our site over to WordPress VIP, which is an incredible enterprise service provided by Automatic. But in addition, we had budget to send me to the WordPress VIP intensive developer training camp up in Napa Valley. Now imagine someone like me. I was a designer at one time. I became a web designer, but I was really a static HTML guy back in 2010. And I was plopped into a WordPress environment with some of the core creators for WordPress from all over the world that had gathered in Napa. Matt was there to talk to the group. So it was like all the brain trust of WordPress was there. The amazing thing that I discovered at that very moment was the word community in terms of WordPress. I was asked, my first task was to create a virtual box for my installation of WordPress. And again, imagine someone that's a front-end designer with zero developer skills, trying to figure out what a virtual box is and then to install it on top of that. But the amazing thing was that each and every person that I asked a question to, they helped me. WordPress is an incredibly nurturing environment. And that's what I really appreciated about it. Zoom forward, 3 years ago, 1 week, I was laying on a table similar to this. I didn't have one, but two blocked arteries. And as after the surgery was completed, they had opened up my arteries, but my life would change forever. When I woke up, I decided I was going to do only the things that I truly loved. I was going to take a leave of absence for 3 months. And those 3 months reshaped my path in WordPress. I attended over 18 meetups all over Southern California, from the furthest reaches of the Northern Valleys, all the way down to Oceanside, Orange County, Riverside. I got as much WordPress as I could take. I went to every WordCamp I could. I volunteered for WordCamp Los Angeles. I went to WordCamp US virtually. I wanted to give back. I wanted to give to others. And I wanted to do it meaningfully. And I remembered that time back in 2010 when all those people reached out to me and helped me. So I wanted to turn around and give it back. I started to speak at WordCamps. And that's why I'm here today, to give back to the community. You can find me on any of the social media channels at Joe Simpson Jr. You'll find my slides here, Joe Simpson Jr., WordCamp Denver, after the presentation. So I'll give you a second to write that down. So let's begin. Out of clutter, find simplicity. Now you're in Vegas. The slot machines are going, there's noise, there's fun, there's excitement. You don't know what to do. Should you go to the buffet? Should you get a drink? Should you go outside and see people watch? It's so much to do. Lucky 7. Don't install anything until you hear this presentation. What I hope to provide my audience with today is some knowledge on a practice that you should take, or an approach that you should take when you're looking at plugins. You don't want to be overwhelmed. So let's start at the top. What is a WordPress plugin? And this is just a rough definition to break it down to its simplest form. It's a bit of code that when you add it to your WordPress site, it adds functionality or extends your existing functionality on your WordPress installation. For example, something like you want to start an e-commerce store. You install WooCommerce. WooCommerce provides the functionality to run a store. You may want to do a social network. You may want drag and drop page building. You want to have a forum. All those things are, you pick a plugin from the repository or you buy one online and you pop it in and you go away with it. What are these numbers? There are over 56,000 plugins in the WordPress repository. Now, don't take into consideration that in addition to the repository, there are premium themes. Premium themes are plugins that add even additional functionality, but they're usually at a price. So there's over 56,000 plugins that are free. Can you get where I'm coming from? It can be overwhelming. There's so many. I think one of the funniest things that I encounter when I run my meetup, when people tell us what they're doing with WordPress and what they're using to do it, I always hear a plugin I've never heard of before. But like I said, there's a million ways to do it, but there's a downside to it as well. So say, for instance, on the plugin repository, you wanted to find a calendar tool. You just enter calendar and it comes back with a few, but how do you decide which plugin you want to use? Before we get into this next segment, I want you to go into the chat and ask any questions that you have for me for this topic. But what I also wanted to do is to have it very interactive. I want everyone that's watching this presentation to provide answers to some of my questions, but also start with how many plugins you use on your personal WordPress site at this current time. Write that in the chat. All right. Then what about on a client site, for example? How many plugins do you use? And that will give us an idea of how many plugins are too many. Like a slot machine, you have a whole bunch of different ways to win. There's different combinations that lead to victory and a cash out, but it can be quite confusing because there's a million different ways to do a million different things. So although there are no set number of too many plugins to have, here's some things to consider. The more plugins you use, the more it can slow down your website. And we all know, and if you look at numbers, you can get various numbers, but if you take over 3 seconds to load a page, most people are bouncing. They're getting out of here. They're going to another site. They don't have the patience to wait for your page to load. So you lose potential customers. Having too many plugins creates an update issue. What if you have outdated plugins? It can create security vulnerabilities on your site, which can be a threat to your business as well. Various combinations of plugins, like I showed you in our slot machine example, can cause conflicts that can cause site crashes. Say, for instance, your spam plugin and your portfolio or your slider plugin, they don't get along. The code is written in a way where they conflict. It can cause your site to crash. So there's so many variables that go into deciding on a plugin. So our first question today, and again, I want this to be very interactive. When we stop at the end, I want to see a lot of comments in the Q&A chat on YouTube. But how many plugins would you say are too many? First answer, 25 to 50. Up to 20, 0 to 5, or no limits. Like I'm in Denver, I'm hiking on some mountain, I'm hanging on the edge. I love to live on the edge. So I'll give you a second. Is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? Okay. And again, this is just a guideline for you to use. But if you get up around 20, and I'm pretty conservative, I don't even like to get up around 20. When you get up around 20, there could be dramatic impacts on your WooCommerce store or your WordPress installation. So keep an eye on that. And again, this goes back to what I asked you at the beginning. In thinking about 20 plugins, how does that compare to what you use? All right. Does WordPress plugin performance even really matter? We all know that a couple years back, Google said, hey, the faster your site, the better it's going to rank. So why would you intentionally slow down your site for functionality that's going to hurt your performance, that's going to hurt your business? In terms of e-commerce, a 1 second delay can cause at least a 7% reduction in conversions. Again, why are you just turning money away? Again, try to be performance conscious when you're thinking of your plugins. Here are some WordPress plugin best practices. Excuse me. Update, update, update. Always keep your themes, your plugins, and your core updated and current. Again, an out of date, any one of these instances that are out of date can cause impacts on your performance as well as become a security risk. And we all know in the WordPress environment, WordPress is always updating, so you need to keep an eye on that. Only use the plugins you really need. Now, before you throw something at me, hear me out. A lot of times, and like I said, when folks come into our meetup with a problem, they'll throw a plugin at me that I'd never heard of, but I'm like, have you considered using this? Or have you considered using Jetpack or something that's a little more stable? Only use the plugins you really need. A lot of times we'll find something that we've heard about or someone talked highly about, but then does it really fit our customers or does it really fit the purpose of our website? Again, try to be as judicious as possible in deciding what you're going to use. Uninstall and delete all unused or inactive plugins. This is a big one. If you talk to any of the security plugin people, one of the biggest holes that can form in your WordPress site installation is an unused or out-of-date plugin that provides a backdoor in for someone that wants to do damage or hurt your website. So again, if you're not using the plugin, you temporarily uninstalled it for a reason. If you're not going to use it, you found something better, get rid of it. It'll also help in terms of your performance as well. Test your plugins before you install them on the site. In Santa Clarita, we're known for being the home of the Western movie. John Wayne, William S. Hart, they all shot movies out here on the movie ranches. And there's a term in the WordPress community or in the development community called cowboy coding. A lot of folks, especially beginners, install directly on the live site. That's crazy. What if the plugin you installed doesn't work with your theme? It could crash. Test them on a local server. Pull that site down, put it in a staging environment and test it thoroughly. As a matter of fact, this weekend, I'm going to spend time on our site at Metro. We need to do some compression of some images, but I'm going to test it first locally, and then I'm going to push it up and test it and run it over the weekend. Use a consistent process to pick your plugins. And again, all of these things that I'm showing you today, especially as a new person in the WordPress community, try to incorporate these things into how you approach looking for plugins. We're going to go over some specifics that I'll recommend for you. But again, I would love to hear what you think in the chat on how you go about deciding on plugins. How do I find the right plugin? Okay, we're inside of the WordPress admin. We've all seen it. You have a couple of options on how to look for a plugin. When you're in the WordPress admin, it's connected directly to the WordPress repository, the plugin repository, and in the upper left-hand portion of your screen, you have featured, popular, recommended, favorite. These are preset filters that allow you to look for plugins based on those features. So for example, if you want some of the most downloaded plugins, you click on popular, and it'll bring back Jetpack, Elementor, Kismet, the plugins that have been downloaded 5 million plus, and it works its way down from there. Also, you'll see on the right-hand corner by the search box, you can search by keyword, you can search by author, you can search by tag. So for instance, if you know the name of the person that made a plugin, or if you know that it's a plugin for Google Analytics, you could type that in the search box, hit enter, and it'll bring you back some results that you can use. Here's an example of information that you'll get when you search for a plugin in the repository. This is for Jetpack. Now you're going to get some critical information that tells you the story of the plugin. So with Jetpack, it gives you a brief description. It goes through and gives you high-level bullet points on what the plugin does, what it is going to do for you, and it'll have an installation page. So if there are any installation items that you need to be aware of, those are listed as well. It has FAQs, so frequently asked questions by people that have interacted with the development team are there, as well as more development-oriented things like the change logs. So it tells you everything that they've worked on to improve the plugin, as well as screenshots of how it's going to look in your admin. One thing that I would suggest as well, a lot of times these plugins or themes will add a new layer on top of your admin. You can see this in the screenshot sometimes, which may impact whether you download it or not. And finally, the reviews. Okay, one of the first items you need to be concerned with is, when was it last updated? I'm going to show you an example in a minute that should scare the pants off of you. You want something that's frequently updated. You also want to know how many active installs. A lot of times someone will develop, you may have a friend that developed a plugin, but it was developed last week. You may want to give it a little bit of time so it can trickle out, get some feedback, and have some user testing before you install that on your high energy, high volume site for your e-commerce client. You also want to look at the reviews. I always look at the 5 stars, but I always make a point to look at the 1 stars. Find out what people are complaining about in relation to that plugin. And that could tell you a lot about how they respond to questions, how they work to fix issues with the plugins. It can really be helpful in terms of you making a decision on whether you want to go through the hoops, if you want to jump through hoops to get somebody to help you when there's a problem, or if they're responsive and really want to help you out, which I find is the case with a lot of folks in the WordPress community. What's the average rating? Again, if it's a 1 star or 2 star, you want to stay away from it. A lot of the tried and true plugins have 4 or 5 stars. And finally, which version of WordPress does it require to run? You always want to make sure your plugins are current with the most recent release of WordPress, but you'll see in the repository that you'll see that some are a few versions back, which can cause concern. if you're thinking of installing it. Here's an example, and I'm not bashing awesome alert blocks, but this is in the repository. And the repository is great in that all plugins that are in the repository have been vetted. It's sort of like you have a car, it's a Honda or a BMW, and you go to an authorized Honda dealer. You know that that person has met a minimal requirement in terms of being able to work on a Honda. So you'll get a certain level, a certain minimal level of service. The repository is the same way. In the repository, if the plugin hasn't been updated, it'll let you know. There's a gold warning banner on this plugin that tells you that this plugin hasn't been tested with the last 3 releases of WordPress. So stay away from it. And it gives you a warning like it is probably abandoned or it's not being maintained. So again, it gives you, WordPress is great about giving you tools and information on making your decision. Okay, let's take a look at the plugin also. Again, it was updated 11 months ago. It's almost been a year since someone worked on this plugin. And look how many active installations. It's fewer than 10. That, I think, you know, I created a small plugin. Maybe my plugin has more than 10, which is kind of ironic. And I'm not even a developer. So again, that should scare the pants off of you and make you run in the other direction. How do you choose a WordPress plugin? Again, look at last updated. And again, these are the things we just looked at. But again, I want to drum it into your head. Try to be consistent with this process because it'll help you out in the long run. How many active installations? What WordPress version? The average rating and the reviews and support. Again, a lot of these free plugins may have support, but they also, you can work through the chat to get your questions answered as well. Our next question, which plugin is the most downloaded plugin of all time? Is it Akismet? Animal Crossing New Horizons? Actually, that my daughter told me to put that one in. Contact Form 7, Jetpack, or Yoast SEO? Okay, put your answers in the chat. I'll give you a second. Jetpack. Jetpack has over 5 million plus downloads, over 176 million views. What Jetpack is if you're familiar with, if you're a designer, for example, Photoshop is similar to Jetpack. Photoshop is made up of a whole bunch of filters that when combined together provides a great photo editing experience. Jetpack has a contact form. It has a photo gallery. It has image optimization tool. It has spam. It can protect you from brute force attack. It has a whole bunch of things bundled together. So as a beginner, that is a great plugin to use because again, instead of going out and getting all these separate plugins, you can get them all in one place. The more advanced you are, you may consider Jetpack has too much overhead on your site's performance and you may want to use something specific. How do I publish my own WordPress plugin? You're a little more advanced. You want to do something on your own. You want to build something. How do you do that? WordPress has a lot of resources for you to use in that sense as well. They have a plugin handbook that walks you through everything that they're going to ask for in order for your plugin to be added to the repository. It walks you through step by step with a whole bunch of great links on how to do it. And it's good that I'm talking about Vegas because my notifications are dinging off like I'm in Vegas. So I apologize for that, but I should have closed Slack. So I apologize. But actually just think of that as background noise. We're at a casino and that's the dinging of the machine. And again, so in the handbook, it walks you through all the things that you need to know about plugin creation. How can you give back to WordPress? You heard my story and you're like, Joe, you're inspirational, or Joe, you're annoying. Either one. I want to give back to WordPress. How can I do that? Open up a tab right now and go to makewordpress.org. I know when I got back into the WordPress community, I was a former designer. I used to do animation. I was interested in marketing. I did accessibility work. So it was a plethora, just like Vegas is, it was a plethora of things to get involved in. So it's overwhelming, but depending on what you want to get into, and you can get into a little bit of everything, just go to the page and they had it broken down into the different sections, when they meet, how you can get involved on Slack. And it's a great way to give back to the community. If you want to do some plugin work, you can also join the Make team for that. There's also more resources on the Make WordPress site for plugins as well. So that's available to you as well. And again, the links are at the bottom of a couple of these slides, as well as they're clickable. So if you want to download these slides and have these resources for when you go back and take a look at this video, or if you want to take a look at it after this presentation, I suggest you do that also. Joe, you're whipping me up into a frenzy. I'm so excited. How can I learn more? Right after this presentation, scoot on over to the development track and join David Wolfpaw. He's going to tell you how to build your first WordPress plugin. How convenient is that? You don't even have to get out of your chair. You just have to slide your mouse and click. WordPress is convenient, people. There's other resources in the local area. Whenever I do these presentations, I always try to look into local resources. Our community in Santa Clarita is all about learning. We're a brand new community. We always try to bring people in to speak, to do demos, to help our learning community grow. In every community, there's learning resources at your library, and these are free. How many people, I always hear people come to me at a WordPress meetup and say, I bought a premium plugin, I bought a premium theme. How many of you have bought a theme based on how it looks? You're like, oh, it's got this, it's got everything I need. You get it, you install it, you pay a premium price for it, and it doesn't look the way it did in the demo. What I'm talking to you about today is to try to help prevent those roadblocks. And a lot of times people are on their last leg when they come in. They're so desperate because when you're overwhelmed, you get discouraged. When you're discouraged, you abandon your projects. So what we try to do in Santa Clarita, and what I always try to do in these presentations, is to encourage you to try free resources first, get your skill level up, and then move on to something premium if you need it. A lot of times, these free resources will teach you the things that you need to know to keep your site basic, to keep it high performing, to keep those core tenets for your site at the forefront. Again, we don't want to overload it. We don't want to slow things down. We want to have a lean, mean fighting machine. So on the Douglas County Libraries here in Denver, you can get lynda.com. It's free. If it works similar to the way it does here in Los Angeles with your PIN or your library card PIN number, you can log in and you can access all the Lynda library, which is great. They have an incredible number of resources in WordPress. They have learning paths that'll take you from beginner to junior, and from junior to advanced level WordPress designers and developers. So they have a lot of learning hours of all the folks that you've seen in the WordPress community. As a matter of fact, you'll even find Patrick there. He's the lead organizer for WordCamp Denver. And I just built a WooCommerce site. Again, WooCommerce is a plugin, and he helped me do that. He's an incredible talent as a teacher. And again, I've met a lot of these folks in the WordPress community through my time on Lynda. You can also, if you're a Udemy fan, you can use the Denver Public Library to use Udemy. I think they just switched over from Lynda to Udemy, and it's a tool that's great for you to do self-paced learning. You know, we all don't learn at the same pace. Like for me, I love to see somebody explain it visually and walk me through it and be able to pause it, hit the back button and go back 15 seconds and learn it again. So these are great resources for you to learn. Again, these slide links are in the slide deck, and I invite you to download it and take a look at it. This is an underrated resource. I don't know, show of hands, how many folks have heard of WordPress TV? WordPress TV, for every WordCamp that occurs, the majority of them, like this one, are being filmed. in a couple of weeks, WordCamp Denver will be online at WordPress TV. And say, for instance, you want to go back and you want to take a look at a presentation that was here on plugins. You can simply add plugins in the search box, hit enter, and it'll bring back the results from all the topics that were presented on plugins from all the WordCamps since they started recording. So it's a great resource to see the history of how plugins have developed, but also see the latest in terms of how plugins are developing and how they work with WordPress. So in summarizing, each person has a unique need, and each client has a unique set of needs for their WordPress site. So these rules may not fit everyone, but they're a good basis for you to make decisions that are informed and for the best interest of your clients. Always cover your basics by installing core plugins. For example, I'm surprised at how many people don't have a security plugin. They don't have an SEO plugin, a performance plugin, or a backup plugin on their site. I always say start with the basics. And again, that's 4 plugins on your way to 20. Be consistent in how you select your plugin. Again, stick with the repository first, move on to the premium items once you get some knowledge and some experience under your belt. Be judicious with your use of plugins. Again, be picky, picky, picky. Only use the plugins that you really need. It's sort of like a car. You know, you'll see a car that has the fat wheels or the tinted windows. All that stuff is not going to help the car move. It's going to make it look nicer. But in terms of plugins, all that extra stuff is going to weigh your site down and slow your site down. And again, in a world where people are on their phones, slow is bad. And slow can be disaster for your business. Okay, this is what you've been waiting for. You heard the song, it got you excited. You want to be lucky. These are my lucky 7 plugins. And again, they change. A year ago, for example, the first item wasn't on my radar. I had a project in the office. The drag and drop plugins were good for our company because we have a very mature brand at Metro. Our design group has a standards manual that's this thick, and it's been around for 10 years. And so we have to design pixel perfect with lots of layouts that are really designer centric. So I started using Elementor Page Builder. WooCommerce is a great plugin. Most people, especially now during the pandemic, a lot of folks were forced to stay at home. How many folks out in the audience tried to order food from their favorite restaurant and found out they didn't have a website, or they had a PDF on their website that was old without a phone number, or it didn't have the latest information? You went to this, you decided to order something and you drove to the place and it was closed, but the information wasn't on the website. So many opportunities are out there for you to build websites for these people, especially now. So WooCommerce is a great option. It's a free option. It's different from Shopify in that sense. And it's a great tool to learn, especially in the WordPress space. WordFence. I'm a fan of WordFence. I met Kathy and the team. I know them well. Having a security plugin is really paramount. Again, you want your site to be up and protected from attacks. And I told a story at one WordCamp. One of the first things I did when I started my leave of absence was my brother, he prints t-shirts. And if you've been to WordCamp Santa Clarita, you've seen the shirts that he does. He's a great printer. He had a website that he farmed overseas. And when I looked at the install information, it didn't have a description. It was like a bootleg theme. It had so much spam and virus information there. It was incredible. So anyway, the first thing I did when I redesigned the site for him is install some sort of security program. Yoast SEO. Again, SEO is important. You want to rank. So it's important to have an SEO tool, and Yoast SEO is pretty popular. Jetpack. Again, Jetpack is a bundle of a lot of great resources that I suggest you use, especially as a beginner. If you need to have a lot of things bundled that are very smart and efficient, it connects to WordPress.com, WordPress.org. So you have the weight of automatic behind this plugin, which is great. It's constantly updated. They have a number of different flavors, including a free one, so you can grow with Jetpack. Akismet. We all don't think about it at the office, but our email is, a lot of the spam is being taken away automatically for us by our email spam. And that's what Akismet is. It works on spam attacks and it just silently moves it out of the way for you. So it's a great resource. And a backup plugin of some sort, Updraft or Backup Buddy, you might want to install that as soon as possible as well. You don't want your site to crash and don't have a way to bring it back up quickly. All right, so we're finishing in Vegas. Wow, this was an amazing trip. We look out the window of our plane, take a deep sigh. Vegas was something else. But the sense of satisfaction that you have taking away all this knowledge for your plugin adventure, I hope it was worthwhile. So I'll leave you with this. Be willing to make room in your lives for the birth of dreams. I'm all about positivity. I'm all about inspiring and doing incredible things. I want to know what you do with WordPress. And lastly, be lasting change. This fall, our country's history is on the line. So let's make it count. My slides will be here. Joe Simpson Jr. at WordCamp Denver. Again, join us for a virtual meetup at WordCamp Santa Clarita. We'd love to have you in to talk about anything you want in the WordPress world, of course. Join us to talk Elementor. I'd really love to see you in the spring next year in person, but if not, join us virtually for WordCamp Santa Clarita next April. My name's Joe Simpson Jr. You can find me anywhere at Joe Simpson Jr. Thank you very much. Denver, have a great day.
And Joe, we do have a number of questions in the question and answer in the chat.
Great, let's do it.
I'll start with the first one here. So with regard to plugin updates, how frequently do you recommend running updates?
Well, to me, a great thing about WordPress is that you have an option, if you use Jetpack, to do automatic updates. I usually turn that on for my client sites. Some people are wary of that. Sometimes you do a lot of customization and you're really hesitant about making updates. So if you're an advanced person, you may not want to do it all the time, but I would recommend someone that's beginning in WordPress. If you're using Jetpack, do it, use the automatic update feature. And I would do it as often as possible. Again, you don't want to get versions behind. There's always small incremental updates in the WordPress core. So you want to make sure that your plugins are consistent with that as well.
Very good. This is almost the same question, but yes, Josh and some others asked, are there any plugins or services you recommend to automatically update your plugins? And for example, do you have an opinion about Companion Auto Update?
I do not. Like I said, I'm really simple. So like I said, I use Jetpack's auto update feature because it's bundled in to that plugin, but I would love to hear more about the plugin you suggested.
Let's see, and Alfred asks, if there are 59,000 plugins, does that mean that the WordPress core should be more robust?
Well, again, we don't want too many. The WordPress core, I would say the WordPress core and its ecosystem is pretty robust. I don't know if that was said tongue in cheek, but again, we don't want to get too far over 20. That just tells you that you have a lot of options. Again, the great thing about this community is that when you think, I have a great idea for a plugin, 9 times out of 10, someone's already built it. So a lot of that is at your fingertips, and that's a great resource to build on. Some of the other platforms may do it a little differently, but that's one thing that's great about the WordPress community. There's been over 57,000 people that have created plugins for your benefit.
Very cool. Thank you. You knew this one was coming. Have you tried the Santa Clarita diet?
Well, actually, I have. I'm hungry for brains right now. You can see I'm starting to sweat. So I haven't had my brains in a while. The great thing about that, and I think the other show that was shot up here was Weeds. That was on Showtime also. So yeah, so those, I always get that. The other thing that Santa Clarita is known for, other than the Western, is we have one of the largest amusement parks in the country here in Santa Clarita. So people they either come up and say, Joe, I've been to Magic Mountain, or they say, Joe, do you eat brains?
I love that you were prepared for that. That's awesome. Let's see. The next question is, since Jetpack has so many features, it sounds like it has a lot of code, maybe even bloated. Does it cause performance problems?
Well, I would say it probably does. Again, for the purposes of this presentation, for someone that's beginning, it's a good tool to get started. Again, if you find a feature in Jetpack and that's all you need, I would suggest getting a plugin that only does that, or writing your own plugin for just that bit of functionality. You don't need all the overhead. But like I said, it has a CDN. It has so many things that protect and benefit your site at the beginning of your WordPress journey that I would recommend it. I would say intermediate to advanced users, think twice about it.
That's a great answer. That's very helpful. Let's see. The next question is, are there any downsides to using a commercial theme that comes bundled with specific paid plugins?
Well, the one downside, and it's a big caveat, is when you go with a premium plugin, you're locked in to that premium plugin. So for example, if worse comes to worse and your client wants a different theme or something different, that additional functionality that's unique to that theme is going to stay behind. So you're going to have to rebuild it based on your new theme. So a lot of premium themes upsell you with a lot of those features, but I would say try to use a really base theme and add in the functionality that you need for a slider, or that you need for a contact form. And that way you won't be locked in if you have to, because themes, if you look at it, think about 3 years ago what theme you're using, or 5 years ago, if you've been around that long. Themes change, and now with the advent of the Gutenberg block, themes are going to be going in another different direction in the next 2 or 3 years. So I would say, again, I always say stay away from premium. And again, this is just, again, my approach is always to help the beginners get up and going. As you get more advanced, you may need something very specific. I did a site for a client in WP Bakery. He was using WP Bakery, and I was like, that page builder is like from 5-6 years ago. Why are you still using that? But he was locked in and he was scared to move. So again, I would say try to be as lightweight as possible so that you can pick up and move if you need to.
That's great advice. Thank you. That's a great answer to that question.
I feel like James Brown. I have to do this. Sorry.
No problem. Let's see. The next question is from Ahmed, and he asks, would you recommend WPhivecom as a WordPress repository for comparing and finding plugins?
Ooh.
And that's not one I've heard of before.
Oh, I haven't heard of it either. And is this Ahmad from Bangladesh? I'm not sure.
His name's on the screen. You may be able to see it there.
Okay. Actually, I can't see the chat. But I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with that one. I'll look it up and check it out. And one thing that I always tell the people that I either work with at our meetups or when I do these presentations, if I don't know, I can definitely look it up and find out. I haven't heard about that service, but I'll definitely check it out.
Okay. Yep. It's called WPhivecom. That's not one I had heard of before either. Let's see. A couple more questions are in here. The next one is, what do you suggest if you love the functionality of a plugin, but the developers stop updating it? Should you keep the plugin or look for an alternative, or what's your advice?
Ooh, it depends. The longer it goes out of service, the more risk you could possibly be at for a security issue or a conflict moving forward. So the difficult thing is you're probably going to have to find another solution but and I would also say if you can strike up a relationship with the plugin builder, maybe they can give you advice on how to migrate to something different. Again, you don't want to keep too many old things on your site for too long. So like I showed you the one example earlier where it was like out of date for 11 months. If your plugin is over 3 to 6 months old, you may want to consider thinking about migrating. But again, the great thing with these plugins is that a lot of times when we find something that we like, we want to hold on tight and not let go. So it's a tough one. I would say it'll be a problematic the longer it goes out of date. So just be careful with that.
And one possibility is you may, depending on how complex that plugin is, you may be able to find another developer who could build something similar.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, next question. So the title of your talk was Lucky 7, and Eat, Walk, Learn is asking, Joe, what are the 7 core plugins you recommend?
Ooh. Like I said, to me, it always starts with the core 4, right? You always want to have a security one. You always want to have an SEO. You always want to have a backup. And you always want to, and I would say the utility tool is the 4th one. And I always say Jetpack is the 4th one. So those are the 4 I would start with as a beginner. I also, like I said, it depends on your project. Like this past year, my job was to try to convince, we lost our lead developer, and my job was to try to get our mother site, which isn't in WordPress, into WordPress. So I did this big study of the 3 page builders, the 3 modern page builders, Divi, Elementor, and Beaver Builder. And that, I tested out all those 3 plugins. And over time, I was able to show them what it could do. And it actually helped us decide which direction we would go in. I sort of lost my train of thought. What was the question again, Ron? I'm sorry.
Let me jump right back to it. It was, the 7 core plugins that you recommend.
Yeah, so basically those plugins are on my radar now because I had a really specific reason for using them. Like I said, you start with the basic stuff, cover your bases, make sure your site's performing well. You want some sort of analytics plugin too. So I would probably say that's on my top 5. But then your needs vary. So it just depends on what you're doing. Like for instance, if you're building an e-commerce site, then you automatically should have WooCommerce as part of your plugin core set. So again, have a base that covers your core needs or your primary needs, and then build off of that.
Awesome. Oh, this is great. Let's see. We have about 1.5 minutes left. Maybe just share for maybe 30 seconds or so. I need to make one announcement at the end, but what are your thoughts about Gutenberg? You mentioned the 3 modern page builders, Elementor, Beaver Builder, and one other. How do you feel about Gutenberg and where WordPress is headed?
Well, I'm excited for Gutenberg. I know we had at WordCamp Santa Clarita, Mark Urain, who's a part of the Automatic team that's building Gutenberg, and he's involved in the next phase, which is the design phase of Gutenberg, where it's going to evolve. And it looks exciting. I mean, to me, when Gutenberg gets up and running, then I think the other page builders are going to have something to worry about. I think right now, I'm eager to see what topics we have at WordCamp US. There have been some great submissions on the topic. So I want to see, I mean, one of the things that I always encourage folks to do, and one of the things I really love doing, when I go to WordCamp US, I love Matt's State of the Word. He always talks about what's coming next. And the last couple of years, it's always featured Gutenberg. And it's really exciting to see where it's going just from in the last 3 years, how it was launched and how it's developed over the past 2 years is incredible. So I'm eager to see what it does. I love how intuitive it is. And then as the open source community build on these blocks and create these patterns, and it's going in a lot of great directions. So I'm eager to see where it goes. I'm excited about it. Me
too. Well, let's wrap it up there, Joe. Thank you so much for your talk. That was really a lot of very useful practical information. Excellent talk. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And to everyone still on the line, we'll be closing this channel in a moment. And the next talk coming up in just 10 minutes is 10 Years of Awful WordPress / Agency Mistakes by Zach Weinberg. and we look forward to learning from him. So stick around for that, or feel free to jump into one of the other 2 tracks that are going on simultaneously. Joe, thanks again, and hope to see you here in person in Denver next year.
All right. See you, Ron.